Hey y'all, welcome back to Rope Trotting. Today we are going to be breaking down some of your comments from a video that we recently put out called 5 Ways That Our Views of America Have Changed After Living in Denmark for 5 Years. And when we made this video, we kind of expected that people would have a lot to say, and boy did you. So we'll get into it today and break down some of the most interesting comments about that video of 5 ways that our views of America have changed since living in Denmark. But first, let's introduce ourselves.
Yeah, if you're new, my name is Mike, and I guess my favorite kind of comment is the person who says first 5 seconds after we put the video out, not even watching the video.
Yeah, we appreciate you. And my favorite comments are, the guy who asked if we had an OnlyFans. Yeah, no.
And if you haven't seen the video yet, we'll have a little link over my shoulder here and in the description below. But to do a little quickie recap, the 5 topics we hit were number 1, about American rugged individualism. Number 2, talking about how work-life balance is different. Number 3, talking about how America is actually pretty good at integration. Number 4, the dark side, how everything is getting over-politicized in America. And finally, number 5, talking about how freedom maybe isn't uniquely American.
Yeah, so let's see what you guys said in the comments, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay, so the first one I think actually had to deal with that idea of freedom.
Yeah, so Cecilia wrote, one of the biggest freedoms in Scandinavia is the freedom to live without religion. It's one of the most disturbing sides of the U.S. to me, the concept that religion has such a big impact on the way your country is run. You have to be, or at least pretend to be, a good Christian to get anywhere politically in the U.S. In Scandinavia, it would be expected of a politician to keep their faith, if they have any, separate from politics. For me, one of the biggest facets of freedom is not having someone else's faith or religion dictate how I live my life.
Okay, well, I would say that the first correction that I would want to make about this comment is that to be a politician in the U.S., you don't have to be religious, you have to be rich. But seriously, it's kind of an interesting thought. I think that, unless you really have lived in the U.S., maybe you would have that impression that everything is religion, religion, religion. And sure, I do think that there is a part of our politic which is driven by conservative Christians and, kind of fundamentalist views. You've got the Bible Belt in the South, but I don't think it's that different from a lot of European countries too, where you do have those Christian fundamentalist parties that have a say in politics.
Yeah, I think it's also what you get to see over in Europe, and we kind of realized that in 5 years here, is you don't see the average American on TV. You see the crazies. If you watch some sort of European show that depicts American politics, they're always going to have some crazy right-wing Christian on there. And I mean, I'll be honest, it's not really like that. I mean, sure, I would say you have a lot more politicians in the U.S. and Scandinavia that would talk openly about being Christian, but I would also say it's a little bit more about expressing values as opposed to expressing religion in a lot of ways. And every country, including Denmark, has ways that politicians communicate their values in different ways. And it's just that in the U.S., being done through religion is a more normal way that people say they share certain kinds of values or they're a good, upstanding human being.
Yeah, and there's definitely few states and few districts in the country where I think you could get elected if you were openly atheist or something like that. But I do think that there are many parts of the country and many politicians who are rather secular and don't quite have that religious litmus test that they once did in American politics. I think there was a time where that was pretty true, but I don't quite think that that's the case today. I mean, look at some of the main players in the most recent elections, and you didn't see a lot of religion coming from the Republicans or the Democrats that time.
Yeah, I think this also reflects that in the U.S., I think Americans are much more comfortable talking about religion in general, whereas in Denmark, it's kind of a bit of a taboo for good or for bad in that way.
Yeah, it's almost looked at as a threat, and it's not necessarily being Christian or being one from one denomination of Christianity. I think it's just religion in general. People don't like seeing your outward expression of religion in Denmark, and that's maybe just a cultural difference between the two countries. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's politics driven. Okay, the next comment is from Britt, who said, "Congrats on 5 years. I found a saying about being in foreign countries that was on point for me. The more you travel, the more you learn about your own country. I lived for 10 years in a small city in Germany, and I couldn't really say that I know now how all of Germany is, but comparing it to Denmark, I really learned a lot about things that I took for granted back home.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that point. It's funny how when you come from a certain place, it's all familiar, it's all natural. You don't think about it.
Yeah.
And
Because you don't have to.
You don't have to. And when you move to a new place, or you expose yourself to a new place through travel, or even virtually here through YouTube, suddenly it makes you reflect on your own place and your own life and your own home in a way that you maybe didn't before, because now you have something to compare it to. When you have nothing to compare it to, then it's hard for you to really evaluate your place for anything more than what it is. So let's see what our next comment is. And this one comes from Tina talking about freedom, saying that walking topless on the beach, leaving your teenagers alone in the house for a couple hours, teaching them to drink responsibly at home before they turn 21 or even 18, having an abortion if you need or want one for free, going to the hospital when you need to without being ruined, knowing there's a social system that will catch you if you're unemployed, never having to live in your car due to poverty, having a wage so you can live on only one job. There's a number of ways that we have freedom, or maybe rather than freedom, security.
Yeah. Now, this was a comment that, as you may imagine, got a lot of dialogue under it. And there were definitely some Americans that, how would you say it? Well, they were maybe trolling a little bit, but I also think that maybe they're not used to that Danish directness that just came through in this comment. But I mean, I tend to agree with a lot of what she said. Mm-hmm. Also think that the concept of freedom is maybe a bit different between the two countries, which is sort of what our starting point was in the video that prompted this.
Yeah, I think if you were to compare the two again, Denmark is all about societal freedom, meaning that they'll sacrifice in some cases some of the freedoms of the few for the good of the many, whereas the US is based on individual freedom, meaning that there's more willingness to sacrifice some of the freedoms of the many in order to secure individual freedoms of the few. It's the nature of how the nations were founded, and I think that's a fundamental thing that runs through how there's a core fundamental difference between the US and Denmark culturally in that way.
Yeah, and I do think that it results in some things in American culture and American society where we have a weaker safety net. I mean, that's true. For me, I think that's why my values fit a bit better in Denmark. Because there is a bit more income inequality in the US, and people look at that more as just a result of the way that it has to be, the way that it should be, or that it's because somebody worked harder than somebody else. And it doesn't really account for those things, like it was said, like if you go to the hospital, it's not going to ruin you for life. And there are people in the US who lose their house or things just because somebody is disabled for a car accident or something that can't be controlled. And I get why those extreme examples are what a lot of people think about in Denmark. Just like Americans always say, you pay 50% taxes, and that's not true because maybe they don't understand how Danish taxes work or a progressive tax system works.
Marginal taxes.
Marginal taxes, rather. That was in the, a little bit of that dialogue was in all of the comments that were brought up from this one comment. But yeah, it touched on some hot some hot issues for people.
And as far as some of the other freedoms, like, we see it all the time with kids that are very comfortable riding public transit through Copenhagen at a very young age. I think there's also an element of trust in general Danish society here.
It's higher trust here.
It's a higher trust, whereas in the U.S., and this is especially, I think, true in the last, say, maybe 40 years, there's a whole concept of stranger danger that you need to be careful of the kids because they're going to get snatched up and stolen by somebody, which probably did happen, but it was like, one or two times. And now it's turned into basically our entire upbringing, which is that you can never leave a child unsupervised. Whereas here you have no problem putting them in a baby buggy in the middle of the courtyard or in front of a cafe.
Yeah. And again, it's that trust in society. It's those worst case examples, those extreme examples that are broadcast all over the media. And we didn't even touch on media, but I think that the media is a bit different in both countries too. Yeah. Okay, the next comment is from Kinuni. I feel the polarization coming to Denmark, and I fear that the polarizing discourse that young people in particular are met with online will be something that they take with them into Danish society. I think people sometimes forget that the extreme views that they get from their online interactions, and let's face it, often that is American news and social media platforms, does not generally reflect people's views in the country that they live in. Yeah, I mean, personally, I fully agree. I think it's a huge risk, especially for a society like Denmark that is, as we previously mentioned, really built on trust. And when you have American media, which honestly has a lot of misinformation in there, isn't always held to account, and especially on social media platforms that amplify that message, it can be difficult. And how do you regulate that, especially in a country like Denmark that values freedom and an open society and that trust that things that they're reading are true?
Yeah, I think this is definitely something that I think everyone's nervous about in the modern world, Denmark, US, or anywhere. And maybe the hope here in Denmark that we see is there's some core elements to Danish society that can help maintain those bonds. This is one case where people make fun of Danes for being difficult to become friends with, but maybe one flip side, positive side of having a number of your friends come from your formative years is that as you get older, your political views are going to change, and there's still an acceptance of having people that maybe have a different political party or a different political bent in there that allows people to hear different viewpoints and things like that. I think, if anything, the biggest challenge in America is that polarization has turned itself into self-selection, where people only talk to people of similar views, and that's not good for anybody because you become quite closed-minded without even realizing it.
And then when you mix in the internet, it gets even...
Ooh, it's a toxic mix.
Even worse. Okay, Mikey, I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, we'll do one more. This one's from Brian Pedersen. I used to work for a company where we had an office in Atlanta, Georgia. We had a great time there.
Love Atlanta.
Summer. Yeah. And it opened my mind on how open and welcoming Americans were when I was over there working for 3 weeks. Every day, some people we had talked and invited us out for lunch, and the weekend, on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we had people picking us up at the hotel and just showed off what they thought could be fun and what we might have asked to see. Saw the Braves, played softball, shopping, partying, and everything. And then when he came home, I was embarrassed as a Dane on how we treated them when they came to Denmark for work. We only talked work with them and left them on the hotel and left them to take care of themselves. Yeah, this is true.
I mean, I think that part of that is also work culture. I think there's a lot of truth in this, but I also think that part of that is work culture, where in the U.S. it's very much, when you have a new person to start, you're very much it really is the welcome wagon for them, and it's like, all right, like, let's go do this, let's get a beer, let's do whatever. And part of that may be that Americans put so much more value in that time at work that you do get a little bit closer with your colleagues, I think.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think there's also just a natural tendency where Americans are very comfortable making short-term friends in what comes across as maybe an overly deep way to Danes in this way. So I can totally see how this would happen. I mean, one, I think people are generally very welcoming into their homes or their activities. Things like this, can totally see it in this way. Whereas I think in Denmark, maybe a sense of even inviting somebody to come over like this or join them for an activity on the weekend would be intruding, almost as if, who is it for me to invite you to come with my friends to come do whatever we're doing this weekend. I just think that's maybe a little bit of the cultural difference in there, where we even see it with friend groups around living here, where in the U.S. you would never think twice about just bringing along somebody to a party and not even asking, whereas here that'd be a major faux pas.
Oh yeah, but and especially in America, somebody that's new or temporarily visiting or something, you'd always want to bring them with you, and I think that's a bit different. It's funny, over the weekend we were at a party and we were the only non-Danes there, and I had a conversation with somebody about just how open Americans are and how Danes sometimes are a bit more reserved when it comes to making friends. And I think at the end of the discussion we really agreed that there's probably something in the middle, because I really think there's a lot of room in the middle, of course, but this American hey, like, come be my best friend right away does come off as a little bit shallow, and I totally understand when Danish people tell us that. But I also think that it's kind of nice, especially in a situation where you're visiting for work or new in town, you do want people to make an effort. And I think that there's probably something in between where Danes could culturally be a little more open to new people and reaching out to make new friends. It's I know that a lot of people have friends from all their years growing up, but it's nice to expand your circle a little bit. And for Americans, sometimes it's nice to go a little bit deeper and make those connections make those connections mean a little bit more and have a little bit more value because they're a little more selective with them.
I fully agree. I would also not discount the fact that language can be a bit of a factor here as well, because obviously if you're an English speaker coming from Denmark over to the US, it's easy, everyone can speak English together. The converse, if you were to invite them to a football match on Saturday, could be a little awkward when everyone's a Danish speaker there in casual conversation. So I don't want to discount on that factor as well.
There's always the great equalizer, Carlsberg.
Absolutely.
Yep, it's a great way for people to let their walls down.
Blink.
Michael, you can't ruin it by doing that. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to everybody who watched that first video and commented on it. We loved hearing your thoughts, and we just thought that there was so much great dialogue in the comments that we wanted to continue the conversation a bit. So again, let us know what you think. I don't know if we're going to make a comment video on this comment video, but we will definitely read all of your thoughts and all of your comments there. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet, and hit the bell for notifications so that you can find out as soon as we drop new videos, usually on Thursdays. And thanks so much for watching, guys.
Hi.
Hey guys, don't go anywhere. Stay right here on Road Trotting and check out one of these videos. This is the one we were just talking about, and this is another one that we picked just for you. And if you didn't subscribe, check out over here. Bye.